Good afternoon. This is Walter Coffey. I'm President and CEO of Leading Age Georgia and the Georgia Institute on Aging. And we're very excited to record this webinar today, The Evolving Field of Senior Living. We know that a lot of things are changing in our field, and we have a lot of experts that support our work that pay a lot of attention to what's going on, looking at trends and demographics and stats and make all kinds of observations for us. Today we have two presenters, Tad Melton from Ziegler and Rob Love from Love & Company. And I just want to thank you guys, number one, for taking all the time to put this together because the information is fantastic, and both organizations have shared this information with Leading Age and our Institute's board recently, and it just is so important. I wanted to get it recorded for all of our members to be exposed to. And both of your organizations as well are supporters of our institute, the Georgia Institute on Aging, and because of your support, it helps us bring quality, affordable education to our members. And I just want to thank you for that and for being leaders in our field, because there's just so much integrity in the work that you do and the relationship that you have with our members. So I'm going to thank you in advance, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you so you can get started. So thanks a lot.
Sure, thank you. And just to jump in real quick, Walter, this is Rob Love of Love & Company, just so our attendees can get used to our voices. And I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts here today.
Agreed. This is Tad Melton from Ziegler, and it's an honor to be presenting today with Rob, but also within the overall Leading Age Georgia family. Ziegler is very proud to have a relationship with Leading Age Georgia, and I think we have an interesting dialogue to share today. To that point, we'll turn to page 2, and Rob and I have consulted to prepare some information that reflects some similar observations that both Ziegler and Love & Company have made recently in the current environment. And broadly, we have, as an industry, a significant tailwind that is going to bring a much larger marketplace and many more consumers to our doorsteps in the coming years, and it's really quite exciting. And so it's an opportunity that we've long been awaiting and watching, but is now arriving. And as it arrives, the field is experiencing more competition than we've seen really at any point over the last 10 or 20 years. Competition from other providers, not-for-profit providers of senior living services who are expanding or tailoring their missions and activities to for-profits. And so we may look back at this period of 2014 to 2016 and say that it was a time when a lot of things changed in our industry, and it became much more competitive. So what we're going to do is share the facts and figures for some of those trends and demographics, and then more detailed talk, both Rob and myself, about observations that our two firms are making, and then conclude with some innovative ideas and challenges and carry the conversation forward. We've long noted that when the baby boomers hit the aging services field, that our opportunities for growth and the need to innovate and evolve our products was going to expand significantly. And the 2012 population graph that you see here really evidences that opportunity, with the oldest baby boomer having been 68 in 2014. And given that our average age of entry into a CCRC, which is arguably the first time they'd enter one of our senior housing facilities, is about 80, those individuals are still a ways away. But you see how much the market changes as you get out into that adult decision maker baby boomer age cohort. What's interesting right now is that there's a significant growth, frankly an all-out building boom that's occurring in the for-profit assisted living and memory care fields. And that's largely being driven by this, let's say, 67, 65 to 85-year-old age cohort. And you can see the slope of that line from the 85-year-olds to the 65-year-olds is really significant. And so there's a level of assisted living and memory care development that's occurring in the for-profit sector that's about 15 or 16 to 1 in terms of its ratio to the not-for-profit sector. So this is the first indication that there are new competitors coming into our markets, and the amount of institutional capital that is available in the for-profit sector, for example, is really overwhelming. Hedge funds, private equity funds are aggressively looking to get into the sector. So we have a huge opportunity to do business with an ever-expanding field and serve more seniors in our mission. But as Will Rogers said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And so one of the challenges is going to be adapting to that competitive environment, adapting your business strategies and also your facilities. And so we'll talk more about that in the coming slides.
One of the things that is amazing to me is we always do talk about that, the silver tsunami, the boomers that are coming and so forth. But the sheer magnitude of it, every time I see it, it becomes amazing. If we look at the red part of the graph, which shows the difference between the market size today for people moving into independent living, and when that leading edge of what I like to call the green wall on this chart, in that next 10, 15-year period, it's almost 2.5 times as many people are going to be entering that typical age range in which they have a need for senior living services, whether it be independent living, assisted, memory, skilled care, rehab, home-based services. This is just an enormous opportunity across the board for all our organizations. Now, there is one thing that I do hear some people say, a frequent comment that comes up in board meetings is they say, well, but those boomers, they're not saving anything for retirement. They're not going to have any money. I have a couple of different thoughts on that. One, there are so many boomers in that green wall part of things, part of the chart here, that even if a much lower percentage of them, proportion of them, are able to afford the CCRCs that we offer today, we still could see demand go up simply because of the sheer volume of people. That's the magnitude that we have. But secondly, I think that comment and that concern about the boomers having the assets really fuels a good conversation about needs in the market that are not being met today, and that's for mid-level communities and moderate alternatives. And that's what I think, as Tad mentioned, we're seeing a lot of activity on that for-profit side in independent living, in rental communities that are being targeted not so much at the high-end market, but at that mid-market level. So there are a lot of changing dynamics in the marketplace and a lot of opportunities for all providers.
So if we agree that nationally the demographics are about to really accelerate, silver tsunami, et cetera, we thought it would be constructive to drill down into the details of those demographics a little more closely to determine what does that age group look like? Where do they live? Is that an opportunity for us in Georgia relative to somebody who's in another state? And how should we be thinking about all of this change that is about to occur relative to where we live and operate. And we were able to grab some really interesting data from the 2010 U.S. Census, which was the last big demographic census work that was done and is available. And when you look at the percent population change and absolute population change for different regions of the country, it's really quite stunning. So the country as a whole grew about 9.5% from 2000 to 2010. But in the Northeast and the Midwest, they were actually bringing that average down, as they only grew about 3% and 3.3%. Whereas in the South and the West, the growth rate was approximately 14% each. Said differently, the South and the West grew by approximately 23 million people, whereas the Northeast and the Midwest only grew by about 3 or 4 million people. Really important to note how the population is moving around the country and where the growth is. In particular, it's interesting to note that in Georgia, we were pulling that average up considerably at an 18.3% population change, or about 1.5 million people. So the country is kind of redistributing much of its population. And interestingly, 5 of the top 7 states for absolute population change in that window of 2000 to 2010 were in the South. And the other 2 that aren't technically in the South as far as this breakdown is concerned were California and Arizona, which certainly could be lumped into a group being described as warmer weather, southwest type states. Georgia, as you see here, was ranked 4th, right after Florida and right above North Carolina. Significant growth occurring in Georgia, which should drive significant opportunities for our market. And so when we took an even closer look at the data and broke that growth in the South, now this is the South on this slide again, into different age groups and generations, it was really quite stunning, particularly for the business that we're all in. When you see that the absolute population change in the South in the 45 plus age group was approximately 10 million people, or about 70% of the 14 million people that entered the southern region of the United States during this time frame. And when you reflect back to the slide that we started with, that both Rob and I commented on, and you saw that big wave of seniors coming, you can see that most of that crowd is going to be in our area. And of those, if you go back one slide, of those states that were in the South, Georgia was prominently positioned as far as getting its share of that growth. What's interesting from a caregiver standpoint is that Generation X, I'll be 40 years old this year, so I'm squarely in Generation X. We actually moved out of the South during this time frame, and I don't know what that means as far as conclusions that we can draw, but it really does show that there's quite a need for workforce and caregivers during this time frame, and it kind of makes you wonder who's going to be working at our facilities and caring for all these seniors. So as we kind of think about how we're moving through our conversation today, there's a huge opportunity in the market, and there's even a bigger opportunity in Georgia. And so that should really be forgiving insofar as supporting the operating activities and occupancies of our organizations. But other people see it too. I've been advising my clients, if you're not employing somebody like Love & Company on a regular basis to be studying your market, you should, because I can assure you that somewhere right now there's someone sitting in an office studying the demographics in your marketplace and determining whether or not there's an opportunity for for-profit type facilities or even other not-for-profits coming into your market. So let's talk a little bit for a second about some key themes that both Ziegler and Love and Company are observing in the current environment. And I think it'll be helpful as we think about where we stand today in advance of this accelerating opportunity, but also what some of the challenges are as well. At Ziegler, growth in our sector definitely slowed during the recession and has been slow to recover until recently. New campus construction around the country is significantly decreased and has not yet rebounded to levels really anything close to what we saw in 2005, 6, and 7. However, occupancy is on the rise. If you're a CCRC or an independent living facility, if your occupancy hasn't recovered to 92, 93% plus at this point, I would suggest you probably have a challenge in your overall market, or your facilities are a candidate for reinvestment or upgrades. Most of the planning that we are seeing, and we're seeing more than we've ever observed before, is reinvestment in existing facilities. A lot of independent living projects were constructed pre-recession. We see some of that now. We're seeing a lot of reinvestment in the other parts of the CCRC continuum, or those facilities that might be strictly assisted living or nursing that didn't get capital during that time span. We network with a lot of the leading architects around the country, and almost to affirm they are at their capacity, and almost many of them are turning business away, which if you think back to how brutal the recession was, the architects as the lead, oftentimes consultant in the development process, were closing their doors, and many of them were laying off staff. And now that they're operating at full capacity, I think it's really indicative of a lot of growth activity that's about to start occurring. Some of that's going to come in facilities reinvestment, but we're also seeing significant curiosity around diversifying into home and community-based services and utilizing technology to reach more folks, both more responsive to needs within your walls, but also going out into the broader community. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the number of conversations that we are either taking part in or hearing about from a consolidation standpoint are at an all-time high, and we think that this will be a significant theme going forward, not only for weaker communities to move into the hands of stronger organizations that can provide more scale, but with approximately 55 or 60% of the industry's CEOs retiring over the next 7 or 8 years, many organizations will embrace affiliation or consolidation as a way to move from a long-time executive. Great themes, great backdrop to all of the opportunity that's about to come our way, and really as much enthusiasm as we have heard from the industry in years, and it's really quite exciting. Rob?
Yeah, I definitely echo those thoughts, Tad. We're definitely seeing the same types of things. I'd say 2 to 3 years ago, almost all of our work was fixing problems in communities, communities that really had significant census challenges due to the impact of the recession and the housing downturn and so forth. Today, as you said, those communities have rebuilt census, and now they're focusing on the future. And our work, fortunately, has shifted a good bit from fixing problems to helping plan strategically and to look ahead, analyzing market depth and determining what the opportunities are for growth, really helping clients understand their competitive strengths and weaknesses, to figure out what do they need to overcome, to fix, or to take advantage of as they go forward. Looking at market potential for new services. You mentioned home and community-based services. Earlier you talked about dementia care. These are all areas that have very strong growth potential now and in the years ahead. So basically, we are now working with the architects and the planners and the financial analysts, and Tad, you and your great team, on really helping communities prepare for the future. And what I thought might be helpful to do here is for the viewers of the webinar to talk a little bit about what kinds of information should you be looking for as you, if and as you start looking to the future and developing strategic plans and developing master plans. These are the kinds of things and information that you should have at your fingertips and you should educate your board with as you move forward. We start with just some basics of the market environment. Do you really understand what your primary market is today based on historical data from where your residents are actually moving from? And if you look more broadly beyond that PMA, are there maybe untapped pockets of potential residents, age and income qualified residents that you could be tapping into that could be supporting growth? Overall, we've seen that graph that showed the huge growth coming in the future, and Tad showed a number of charts that showed how that growth can vary significantly by geographic area. Is your PMA one that can support growth? If so, how much? And how much of that growth is it actually reasonable for your community to be able to capture? What's your fair share of that market? We just mentioned what's the market demand and potential for other services, continuing care at home, dementia care, home-based care, and rehab. I'm actually going to talk about it a little bit later in the presentation in particular. And of course, a very critical element of the whole market environment analysis is understanding your pricing and how it relates not just to other communities, but to home values in your market area. Besides the sheer numbers in the market, which the last slide focused on, it's really important to understand the mentality and perceptions of the consumers in your market area. What's their awareness of your community relative to your competitors? And what's their perception? Awareness and perception being two very different things. How do they think of your community relative to the competitors? Do they see you as a leader? Do they see you as lagging behind others? What's the market preferences? We have certain markets where prospects are absolutely comfortable with the idea of living in a high-rise. There are other markets where anything over 3 stories, and quite honestly, anything over 2 stories, nobody would want to live in and step in. So as you look to the master planning, really be sure you understand what your market's preferences are and how they fit with your ability to deliver newer or different products. Contract options also are a really important thing today. We mentioned the growth of rental communities. It's something we've seen in studies, a greater interest in rental than has had in the past. But there's still an awful lot of people out there buying life care contracts and buying fee-for-service. What's the right mix for your community? And lastly, also really understanding the competitive environment. How do your residences, amenities, and services compare to competitors? We talked on the last slide about what your prospects' perceptions are, but there's going beyond those perceptions and really taking a detailed look at what you're providing, how your amenities stack up, how your residences stack up. What is each community's strengths and weaknesses? And how should that impact your strategic planning? What should you be doing and thinking about to take advantage of your strengths or to overcome potential weaknesses? Certainly, as we mentioned before, looking at fees and pricing is a very critical piece of the picture. And what all of this really rolls together into is a question of how strong a value proposition does your community have? And value, as we know, is a very different thing from price and cost. Value is what you get for the cost that you pay, and so it's much more of a perception. You can be the highest priced community in a market if you offer the highest quality dining, nicest residences, and all those types of things. But if you're the price leader, highest priced, but your product is average or below average, then you do not have a good value proposition. So that's what all this is designed to do, is make sure you have a very solid understanding of where you are in the market and what opportunities and paths you should be thinking about as you move forward. Ted?
Thanks, Rob. Value proposition is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about at Ziglar and how we position our business. And there's a great quote that I love from Warren Buffett, and he said, if you're at a table playing cards and you look around the poker group and you don't know who the fool is, you're the fool. And that really reminds me of value proposition and relevancy as far as our organizations going forward and their spot on the senior living care continuum. With the power of the demographics that are arriving and the amount of competition that is accelerating, the need to understand not only your particular niche on the senior living continuum, but also how the other business models that reside in and around you work will be critical. Because I think in the past, in many markets, depending on the size of the market, there might be 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 CCRCs. There might be a smattering of assisted living facilities, and then some maybe a private pay nursing home, a number of Medicaid type nursing homes. And so those are all very distinct businesses, with on the Medicaid side arguably being more commodity-like and your pricing power being relatively inelastic, all the way to a CCRC perhaps on the other end of that spectrum being something that, as Rob articulated, can be a price leader, a price maker, if they're providing a customer the experience that they want. And so understanding the nature of how this all fits together, it's really complex. I mean, when you layer in innovation that's occurring in technology, and you layer in the number of minds that are now looking into our field and coming up with innovative and new ways to do things that we've always done, it brings to mind something that I heard an executive of a financial services firm describe as what keeps him up at night, and he said relevancy paranoia. And we think that everybody is going to have to be on top of their best game going forward to thrive, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities, which leads us to some questions about what are some ways that somebody could disrupt our business model with something that's a very different way of doing that which we've done so long. And so it's going to occur as sure as night turns to day and day to night. We're going to see significant innovation because there are a lot of incentives in the field for that. And so as we move to close, Rob and I put together a few slides here towards the end to share some ideas that we think are thought-provoking about potentially disruptive types of change, as well as new progressive practices that we're seeing out in the field. If you think about a CCRC, for example, really being in the business of hospitality and well-being and healthcare, what if somebody was able to provide that sense of community in a way that didn't require seniors to move to your facility? There's this online social media site called Stitch, which was created to give a 55-plus crowd the opportunity to socialize and do more things together and gather. And a simple overture online about whether or not this might be a good idea produced 700 responses in a matter of hours asking where they could sign up to learn more about potential companions. Not to be perceived just romantically, but just companions to play cards with, to go to the store with, to go to the ball game with. If people if people can gain what they're getting from us in other places, then that's a competitor. And there will be things like this that we might not have thought of as competitors in the past, and we will need to be flexible in positioning our strategies and keeping our products as attractive as possible.
I think a good example of this, Tad, to bring it close to home to us in the senior living field, is the whole concept of rehab resorts, which has started to take off in several markets of the country. Just to have a few photos here, I'll just go through this very quickly, but this entire facility that we have these photos of is entirely dedicated to short-term rehab. It's a very upscale setting, nice environment, living room areas. This does not look like any quote-unquote senior living, quote-unquote again, facility that you would find places. And you look at the typical room, there are no semi-private rooms. Everything's private. It's set up more in a suite setting, comfortable desk area. If you think about the chart we saw early on, showed all the population that's aging and how that green wall I referred to is getting older and older and older. There are an awful lot of people who are looking and will have need of short-term rehab paid for by Medicare. That it may be hip replacements, knee replacements, other types of procedures. They are going to have their full faculties. They don't want to be in a quote-unquote nursing home surrounded by dementia, surrounded by other types of things. And this is something that lots of nursing facilities, nursing communities are starting to look at today, is creating their own small rehab units. But this is taking it to a whole nother level of what that whole rehab experience can be. And this is something that I think it's a great example of the kind of innovation you were talking about with Stitch, directly in our field when people are saying, hey, look at the population, look at the needs. Just like memory care has grown and assisted living has grown over the last 10, 15, 20 years, this rehab market is going to grow tremendously in the next 10, 15 years.
And so as we conclude, we'll leave you with this kind of funny slide, but really which brings a lot of what we've been talking about, and particularly Rob's discussion about questions you ought to be asking, or do you really understand your value proposition, and are you promoting it as well as and supporting it as well as possible? But Google is doing more things than most people realize about life sciences and humanities than you would think for what everyone thinks is an internet company. But they're really a company about social change and exposure to information and ideas. And so they've created this division called Calico, and the goal of that is to keep people healthy irrespective of their age. And one of the things that they've funded, and this sounds silly, but it will come to fruition, is a driverless car. If you read commentary from the automobile manufacturers like GM and Ford, we're not far away from a driverless car. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with anything we're talking about here? And how does that affect me? But what are the different ways that a driverless car could disrupt different businesses? And if you're an organization that relies on entrance fees, and your clients are given the opportunity to be independent for several more years before entering your community, you could have a disruption in your cash flow and business flow that would ultimately take some time to work through. And that's just a off-the-wall thing. And so what we're saying today is that this huge opportunity is on our doorsteps, and there's significant opportunity, but there's significant competition. There's going to be significant innovation, and it's hard to predict what that innovation is going to look like. But really taking the opportunity to make sure you know your game and your marketplace and what your value proposition is to your customers is the surest way that we think you can position yourself to thrive in that environment going forward. And so I hope that this little brain exercise and the observations that Ziglar and Love & Company have shared today facilitate some good thinking and enhance your strategy. And I'll let Rob make some parting remarks, but it's been a pleasure to be in front of the group today, and I appreciate, Walter, the invitation to do this webinar. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dad. I will be, like much of the rest, just supporting and echoing your comments. And just my quick closing comment is, in any market, as demand increases, the opportunity to specialize and create a niche market increases. When overall the market for something is rather small, products tend to be rather generic. But as markets grow and grow and grow, you start to see a lot more specialization in products being offered to meet that expanded market need. That's where senior living really is today. We've seen it over the last 10, 20 years in assisted living and dementia care. We're seeing it now in the growth in at-home care and the rehab services. And it's a really key question for organizations to be asking themselves is, like you said, what is your opportunity to specialize? What best fits with your culture, your skill set, your resources, and the needs of the market that you're in? Those are really important and critical questions for our organizations to be asking themselves. So again, Walter, thank you very much for the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas, and we really hope this has been helpful to all those who view it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I mean, I just took so many pages of notes just listening to you again, even though I've heard you talk about this before. It's just so many important things come to mind. And, one of the things we talk to our members about, it doesn't matter where you find yourself in this spectrum of aging services, continuum and array of services for older Georgians. It's so important to know what's going on around you and be aware of opportunities maybe to expand, to do things differently. And so I really appreciate how that your two companies working together model really the idea of collaborating and learning from each other. And, one of the things we try to do through all the professional development opportunities we have, it's so important to come together and have that networking and shared learning. And our members, when they come together, they're constantly talking about, what did you do? How did you do it? Why did you do that? And what did you learn? And that's what's priceless about our organization, is just that camaraderie and being able to have professionals come together. So, this is information that our members can use with their leadership teams, their planning committees, their boards of directors. And so I think it really lays out a lot of things to think about. So we'll go ahead and end our recording, but I just want to thank you one more time and just let you know how much we appreciate the integrity of your work, your competence, and the way that you just give back to our members. It's really impressive, and it's a lot to be proud of. So thank you very much, and I hope everybody really got a lot out of this.